And Sam, just explain to us, because this ECHR acronym is bandied around a lot. What would it mean for British people if we came out of the ECHR?
Well, it would put us on a diplomatic par with Russia, basically. The European Convention on Human Rights was created with the leadership of two Conservative politicians, Winston Churchill and David Maxwell Fyfe, who's one of my favourite lawyers of all time. And they saw the dangers of communism, they saw the dangers of what had happened in Europe in the mid-20th century, and they said the only way to stop authoritarianism rising again is to put lines in place where you say to the state, this far can you go, but no further. And to recognise that all individuals have a fundamental, basic value. And so, and that's what the ECHR does. It sets down the fundamental points that protect the basic value of human beings, and says to states, whatever you do, you have to respect people's fundamental personhood.
So if we left, OK, so we're on you say we'll be the same as Russia, and I think Belarus isn't in it as well.
Indeed, yeah.
I think, 44 countries are members. But it's not the place of a European court to meddle in what I would argue is domestic politics. It's a huge overreach. Now, you've read, unlike me, the full 300-page ruling from the ECHR.
For my sins. And
I'm glad that the one judge who dissented was the British one. That's reassuring. But don't you think they've gone too far? Because what's next then? Switzerland hasn't gone far enough on climate change policy. Oh, they need to spend more on defence spending. Is that going to be the next thing?
Well, I think we've got to be really clear that the court didn't go outside what states have already said. The core of the judgment was to recognise that states in the Paris Agreement have seen that publicly recognise that climate change is an existential threat, and each state has made public commitments to cutting emissions, right? And so the court's trying to summarise 300 pages of reasoning in 3 sentences goes like this. The court said, states have recognised that this is an existential threat. It therefore goes to people's fundamental humanity. States have been very clear about what they need to do to combat that. So if states don't live up to what they've said they have to do, then that is a violation of our fundamental rights. So it's not saying the court's going to develop your policies for you. It's not saying we're going to create a new right. It's recognising what states have already said and saying to them, you can't just be all talk, you have to be action.
But hang on, NATO members have a commitment to spend 2.5% of spending of GDP on defence. Are they now going to say that all NATO, to make a ruling about countries in the ECHR within NATO, that they've got to spend that 2.5%?
No, I don't think it would go there.
It's the same principle, though, isn't it?
Well, the protection from environmental harm has long been recognised as a fundamental right. This isn't new. There's sort of 30 years.
Defence of our borders, defence of the realm is a fundamental right.
And indeed, the European Court has protected our right to defence, but it hasn't gone so far as to say you have to comply with NATO guidelines, because NATO is I'm going to say regional, and let me just preface that by saying in the broadest sense, NATO is a regional agreement. The Paris Agreement is a global agreement. And so these are on slightly different levels, because what human rights does, it doesn't look at us as Brits or as Americans or as French or Venezuelans. It looks at us as people. So it's very difficult to say, well, people in this western corner of the world have one set of rights and people elsewhere have a different set of rights. But with the Paris Agreement, that's something that applies to every person in the world. So it's on much firmer footing, I think.